Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask Me Anything at CCI Health and Wellness Services. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a otro segmento de haznos preguntas de CCI Health and Wellness Services. Hoy estamos aquí con los proveedores de salud mental, Elyse Schwartz y Allison Brown. We're here today with behavioral consultants at CCI Health and Wellness Services, Elyse Schwartz and Allison Brown. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Today we're talking about suicide prevention, and I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that this AMA is for helping people who have loved ones who may be suicidal, and how to approach and addressing some misconceptions and warning signs. And so that's kind of what we're going to be going over. But at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice that we do have the phone number you can call for the National Suicide Prevention Crisis Hotline. So if you are feeling suicidal and need to speak to somebody, you can certainly call that number 24/7 and somebody will be available for you. And so I will put that up occasionally in Spanish and English so that you can get that number, but you can also comment and we can get that information to you as well. Solo quiero comentar que este segmento es solo para la gente que necesita información sobre el suicidio, cómo prevenir y cómo ayudar a sus seres queridos. Si se siente triste y quiere hablar con alguien, solo mire abajo de la pantalla y va a ver el número que puede llamar para hablar con alguien que le puede brindar ayuda. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to play with the screen here since it's 3 of us today. So if somebody could share with me, what are the warning signs of suicide?
Okay. I can certainly get started with that. So oftentimes people who are feeling depressed or suicidal can, typically it's sort of the typical depressive presentation, and Allison, feel free to jump in. They may be sad or, feel sullen or lose interest in things and, just have a general sense of sadness. Unfortunately, what we do see is when somebody makes the decision to end their life, there's usually a sense of peace or calmness, and somebody may then seem to be better. So if you know of somebody who has been sad or depressed or has struggled with depression and then all of a sudden seems better and seems calmer or more at peace and maybe starts giving things away or feels or seems happier all of a sudden, almost as if like a light switch has been turned on, it just seems better all of a sudden, there can be a sense of worry. Allison, I think, I'm sort of blanking all of a sudden, but, maybe you can help me out here. But yeah, I think sometimes some of the warning signs, where there's this sort of light switch of feeling better.
Yeah, and I think we definitely see it along a spectrum, and I think some other behaviors might be increased isolation, so social withdrawal. It might be even talking about it. Sometimes people will say, would you miss me if I'm gone? Yeah. Or, what would happen if I killed myself? They might even go outright and say it just as a question to kind of test people's reactions and responses. There might be research online, just looking about particular ways, buying particular objects. Certain search histories might reveal certain sites. I think a lot of times now with social media as it is, and what we know more and more about sites like TikTok, that the way the algorithm works is the more that we look in a particular type of material, it just feeds us more of that. So if we're especially for parents out there, if we're saying that our kids tend to be consuming a lot of information about self-harm or about suicide or about depression, that might also be a sign to look out for. Solo quiero traducir eso en español. Estamos hablando de tal vez los señales de riesgo de si alguien está en peligro de tal vez quitarse la vida. Y estamos diciendo que los señales tradicionales de una depresión, como estar un poquito decaído, estar aislado, parar de hablar con sus familiares, puede ser un señal que uno tiene pensamientos de suicidarse. También puede tomar la forma de hablar directamente de la idea, de que tal vez alguien hace preguntas como, me extrañaría si ya no estuviera aquí, o ¿qué harías tú si estuviera muerto? Puede ser que esas personas están buscando información en el internet de cómo quitarse la vida, en qué forma, tal vez hasta prepararse en comprando materiales o preparándose, haciendo cartas, despidiéndose de sus familiares. A veces también cuando uno está decidido en hacerse daño, en quitarse la vida, parece que hay un mejoramiento un poquito rápido. Entonces, si usted ha mirado que una persona por mucho tiempo parece un poquito decaído y de repente se siente mucho mejor o tiene mucho ánimo, también eso puede ser un señal de tal vez que uno está por actuar, por tal vez intentar algo para quitarse la vida.
Thank you for that. And so what are some of the misconceptions about suicide?
You know, that I don't know necessarily misconceptions, you know, that somebody actually may not do it even though they're talking about it, or vice versa. Allison, maybe you have some other thoughts or ideas.
I think some that we see are maybe that this couldn't happen to me, right? That suicidal thoughts only happen to a certain type of person. We find that anytime we're really stressed or really overwhelmed or really sad, sometimes suicidal thoughts accompany that. And it's not because we want to think that way. I think it creates a lot of shame and guilt, thinking, why do I have these thoughts when I don't want to? So one is that it can happen to anyone. I think another one too is that maybe people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts are just doing it for attention, or that they don't really mean it, or they're just trying to get attention. I think another one that's really common, and we see this a lot, maybe with children and their parents, is thinking that if we talk about suicide, it might lead to someone actually trying something or doing something. And in reality, we know that talking about it openly actually helps people. It helps them feel seen and supported, and like there's less stigma. But I think there's definitely a worry that like, oh, we can't talk about it because that will maybe lead to something happening.
Great.
I don't know, Elyse, if you have anything to add to that.
I was just going to say sorry, there was an echo. The one misconception that you had touched on, that if we talk about it, that we might plant an idea, is actually a really big one that I've actually heard from parents a lot, that the concerns that, you know, their children might be depressed, or their child might be depressed, and they don't want to actually ask or talk about it, when in actuality, we really encourage that because the line of communication is so important. And yes, that if you ask about it, that it may cause a child to become suicidal or a teen to become suicidal, when in actuality, talking about something as serious as suicide is not going to create the problem, when in actuality, it's really going to create a pathway for communication. Sure. So I think that's real important. And yes, that is a very common misconception, that if we ask about it, that it may create or cause somebody to feel suicidal, when in actuality, it really opens a pathway for communication.
Yeah, and I think I found a really important one is that I think for many people experiencing suicidal thoughts, it feels like it can never go away, that it's a forever thing. And that's one thing that we'd really like to challenge today, that it absolutely can get better, that it's not a hopeless condition at all. even though it might feel that way.
Right. And I also think that, that sometimes people have suicidal thoughts. And I think, a common misconception is, even if you have the thoughts, it doesn't mean that somebody's actually going to act on them. So I will also try to educate parents or a client that just because somebody is feeling hopeless or suicidal doesn't mean that somebody actually wants to die. It just means that they're feeling pained or they're feeling sad enough where they want the pain to end. And it's not an actual desire to die. So feeling suicidal and actually wanting to die are, in some instances, two separate things, which doesn't always make sense to people.
Entonces, para traducir esto en español, estamos hablando de tal vez algunas ideas falsas sobre el suicidio, o mitos, o cosas que tal vez en la sociedad hay una idea incorrecta sobre qué significa realmente. Y una de esas ideas es que alguien que tiene pensamientos del suicidio, solo quiere hacerlo para atraer la atención, para llamar la atención. Y en realidad sabemos que no es así, que una persona que se sienta así, hay que tomarlo en serio, no hay que negarlo, hay que tomarlo en serio y buscar la ayuda, ayuda profesional. Otros pensamientos tal vez no tan correctos sobre el suicidio es que eso no me puede pasar a mí, que eso solo pasa por otras personas. Pero en realidad sabemos que cuando hay mucho estrés, muchos problemas, mucha tristeza en la vida, a veces la mente empieza a tener este tipo de pensamientos sin querer. Entonces hay esa idea de que tal vez alguien que tiene pensamientos de querer suicidarse significa que lo va a hacer o que quiere quitarse la vida, cuando eso tampoco no es correcto, que a veces podemos tener esta clase de pensamiento sin realmente querer actuar sobre ellos. Y tal vez la última idea falsa de que escuchamos muy seguido es que hablando del suicidio, a veces significa, por ejemplo, si hablamos con alguien que tiene pensamientos de querer suicidarse, significa que le vamos a motivar a actuar sobre esos pensamientos. Eso pasa muy seguido entre padres e hijos, que a veces uno tiene sus preocupaciones, pero no quiere hablar con sus hijos porque no quiere motivarles a hacer algo o plantar una idea. Y en realidad es más importante que los papás hablan de ese tema directamente con sus hijos, que demuestran que no tienen miedo del tema para que su hijo se sienta que está acompañado en ese momento muy difícil.
Thank you so much for that. So I hope you have some patience with us today. Our host is here now. She was running a little behind because, as always happens in healthcare, sometimes we run a little behind, but we're happy to have her here. So I want everybody to welcome Barbara Reyes.
Hi, hello, Barbara. Everyone. Hola.
So she's going to take over our hosting duties, we look forward to hearing some more about suicide prevention. So I'm passing the mic to you, Barbara.
Okay. Well, welcome. Well, I should say welcome to myself since I'm a little behind. To ask me anything. Nice to meet you guys. So I have some questions that they come in regarding suicide prevention. What role does self-harm play in suicidal ideation?
I can start that one.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes we think of self-harm, which often takes the form of cutting, burning, hitting oneself, as being directly related to suicide. And as therapists, we tend to see them as almost two separate things. And sometimes they occur together, but a lot of times they occur separately. So generally speaking, self-harm behaviors tend to be a way for people to try and feel better, that they're feeling so much that they want to find a way to let it out. or they're feeling so numb that they want to find a way to feel anything. Whereas suicidal behaviors generally tend, their intention is to help us feel better by ending our life, by not being alive anymore to feel pain. And so we make this distinction because a lot of times there are people who self-harm who don't have suicidal thoughts, or they don't intend to actually end their life. They're just seeking an immediate relief to pain. We need to be careful, though, because sometimes self-harming behaviors can turn into a risk for suicide. I don't know, Elyse, if you want to kind of speak more to that or add anything to what I was saying.
Right. And so you did a very good job. And, I think the concern is, one of the concerns I always have with, self-harm is when somebody makes a mistake and can accidentally do more injury than intended, because very often the self-harm is a way to release the pain that people are feeling, or to feel pain when they are feeling numb. And as you described, but sometimes, and I've seen it time and time again, where more injury is done accidentally than intended, and there is, again, more severe injury done than intended. And so, oftentimes family members are concerned if another family member is self-injuring, that it is suicidal behavior, when in actuality, if somebody wants to die, typically there will be means to do that. So the self-injury is really typically something very separate than suicidal behavior, most typically.
Yeah, and I'd add that while maybe the intention of self-harm isn't to end one's life, it still is something very serious. And
very serious.
If you ever become aware, whether you yourself or a loved one, that someone might be struggling with that, we'd recommend find a counselor, find a therapist, reach out for help, because it's something that people shouldn't have to feel alone in navigating. I think it brings up, in both cases, a lot of shame. And so we want to encourage you to reach out to help here at CCI or any agency, really, to get professional help in both of those cases.
Yeah, and I don't want to undermine the seriousness of self-harm whatsoever. Clearly, there's, whether it's to feel something or to self-injure in any way, never would want to underestimate the seriousness of self-injury. And yes, we do want, whether it's for yourself or for a loved one or a friend or anybody that you learn is injuring themselves. But in terms of suicide, typically self-injurious behavior will not kill you. But it is serious in of itself, absolutely.
Entonces esa pregunta se trataba de cuál es la conexión entre la automutilación y el suicidio. Y estamos diciendo de que para nosotros terapistas lo miramos como dos temas separados. La automutilación, que a veces toma la forma de cortarse, de quemarse, de golpearse, y comportamientos y pensamientos del suicidio. Y en el caso de la automutilación, mayormente la intención atrás de este acto es para una consolación, es para desahogarse, sacar un dolor emocional muy profundo, y tal vez la persona no tiene otra forma para quitar ese dolor. O a veces también pasa cuando uno se siente tan sin sentido, como vacío, que está buscando cualquier forma para sentir algo. Entonces, en eso, en la forma de cortarse o automutilarse, la intención no es para quitarse la vida, sino es para sentirse mejor. Pero hay un peligro en esto, porque a veces hay casos cuando uno por accidente, sin querer, hace un poquito más daño de lo que estaban intentando, y eso puede ser algo muy peligroso, y a veces esa persona se termina en el hospital, ¿no? Se termina haciendo mucho más daño de lo que esperaba. En cuanto al suicidio, a veces cuando uno ha tomado la decisión de realmente quitarse la vida, A veces tiene un plan muy específico, a veces es algo impulsivo, puede ser algo planificado, pero la intención es para realmente quitarse la vida. Y estamos diciendo que en los dos casos son cosas muy serias y son cosas de que nadie debería intentar, o nadie debería sentirse solo en navegando esto. Entonces solo queríamos motivarles a buscar ayuda profesional, si eso está pasando en su propia vida o en la vida de un ser querido, que busque ayuda. Una terapista, un consejero, un adulto seguro que busque ayuda para navegar una lucha con la automutilación o pensamientos de hacerse daño.
Okay, y how should we speak to someone who is in distress? ¿Cómo debería hablarle a alguien que está como estresado o más o menos que quiere como suicidarse?
Yeah. I think, if you're concerned that somebody is suicidal, you need to be direct with somebody, right? Are you having thoughts of wanting to end your life? Are you, is there something that, that I can help you with? And, if somebody is in distress, there's clearly behavior that leads you to believe that they are distraught or that they are having difficulties. And you can say to them, hey, you've been isolating more. I see you crying a lot more. I see you're a lot more irritable. You've been angry, and I've never seen you yell before, and you've been driving more erratically, you've been doing, and you can sort of list, what's going on, and you've talked about suicide, or, and you can bring to this person's attention what's been going on and offer your support and offer your help in finding them, a therapist or somebody to talk to. And if you are concerned that they aren't safe, meaning that you are concerned they are going to hurt themselves or kill themselves, ask them. They more often than not, they will be very relieved that you have brought it to the forefront and that you've brought it to the conversation.
Yeah, I think if anything, asking, first of all, takes it seriously. It's saying, okay, I'm meeting you where you're at. Like, if anything, ask more direct questions. You can say, do you have a plan? Have you started preparing? Have you thought of what you might do or when you might do it? And I think in this case, the tone is really important. We want to be certain that the way we ask these questions comes across as very compassionate, as very calm. As humans, our brains have the amazing ability to regulate each other. And so if we're talking to someone who's in a really bad place, our ability to stay really calm and grounded is going to help them feel calmer. And so we never want to have this conversation from a place of judgment, from a place of arguing, trying to talk someone out of, why suicide is a bad idea, trying to reason in that moment. But rather just a lot of calm, compassionate, empathetic understanding, and also conveying a sense that things are going to be okay and that you can handle it. I think this shows up a lot in cases of parents, where as a parent, obviously, you're so worried about your child, and you're probably hurting just as much, if not more, than they are. But that as a parent, it is imperative to show that you have things under control. That even if you have no idea what's going to happen next, that you show your kid that you can handle it, because that's going to help them feel safer.
Yeah, I can imagine how it is for a lot of teens nowadays. Is there a specific way to respond to suicidal thoughts in kids, teens compared to adults? Is there like a difference? ¿Hay una diferencia entre la manera que les respondemos a los teenagers o a los niños comparado con los adultos sobre el suicidio?
Está bien si respondo antes en español, porque estamos antes hablando de cómo uno puede hablar con alguien que tiene pensamientos del suicidio, cómo deberíamos acercarnos a esa persona. Estamos diciendo que aunque tal vez es un tema muy delicada, es muy importante hacer preguntas directas, preguntas tal como, ¿tienes un plan? ¿Has pensado en cómo o cuándo quiere quitarte la vida? Yo sé que a veces da nervios o da pena a hacer preguntas así tan directas, pero es muy importante para ayudar a la otra persona a sentirse entendido. Es muy importante hablar de una forma sin prejuicios, sin la intención de juzgar, sino la intención de entender. Entonces, si estamos hablando con alguien que está suicida, deberíamos hablar muy tranquilamente, con mucha calma, para ayudarles a ellos a sentirse también tranquilos. Necesitamos, especialmente si es nuestro hijo, necesitamos hablar con la idea de que estamos en control, que sabemos qué vamos a hacer, que todo va a salir bien, aunque usted no sepa qué va a hacer, pero necesitamos comunicar esa idea que usted, como el padre o adulto, puede aguantar esa situación, porque si usted como padre se pone también muy nervioso, muy mal, eso solo va a poner aún más mal a su hijo. Entonces estamos hablando de cómo, ok, si estamos hablando entonces con un niño, un adolescente, en lugar de un adulto, ¿cómo deberíamos hablar? Yo diría honestamente en la misma forma que hablaríamos con un adulto. Tal vez, pues, digamos, con la misma tranquilidad, con el mismo respeto, con la misma curiosidad por querer entender en lugar de juzgar, o en lugar de intentar convencerle a la otra persona que no debería sentirse así. Una cosa que también miramos mucho, pues miro yo en mi trabajo, es que a veces con adolescentes especialmente, los papás a veces dicen, es que este niño solo lo hace para atraer la atención, o como, este niño no realmente quiere decir lo que dijo. Yo digo, deberíamos tomarlo en serio, porque es un tema muy serio. Entonces deberíamos hablar directamente de eso también. No deberíamos pretender que no existe, porque a veces esos niños se sienten que ya es un tema que no se puede hablar en casa. Entonces no va a decir nada, aunque realmente esté sufriendo por dentro. Elyse, I don't know if you want to kind of add your thoughts about, like, I was saying,
I was going to say, I don't know what you're saying.
I was saying that, honestly, I think when we speak with children and teens about suicide, it's pretty much the same way as we would with an adult, calmly, with respect, taking it seriously, speaking about it directly, even if it makes us uncomfortable. And I said, one thing I think I see a lot with teenagers, especially, in the case of parents, is, feeling like, they're just doing it for attention, or, they don't really mean it. And I think it's imperative that we take it seriously, because if we don't, it sends the message that, like, this is something that can't be talked about in the house. And so, our kids end up feeling this huge burden of something really scary, and like it's not something that can be talked about because their loved ones don't take it seriously.
Well, and that's what keeps it so secretive, is that oftentimes, whether adults or children, teens, it doesn't matter, people don't feel that they can talk about it. So it is so important that whomever is on the receiving end is can be as receptive as possible and as supportive as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want, especially with kids too, when, they are at the, they are looking to their parents or their guardian as their supports, that parents can be supportive, and if, they can keep them as safe as possible. And that's a monumental task for a parent to have to do. And so we do ask parents, if they don't feel that they can keep a child or their teen safe, to get them someplace where they can remain safe. That is, it's not a fair task to ask any loved one to keep somebody from hurting or killing themselves. And that is when we want to make sure that, any loved one, again, is not the responsible person to keep somebody who is having thoughts of wanting to hurt or kill themselves safe, because that is a hefty and monumental task. So that's when we talk about going to an emergency room or to the crisis center. There's one part in being supportive, but there's another part in keeping somebody safe, and that is not a task that families should need to do.
If I could just add one thing, because I think we've been
Please.
talking a little bit more about specifics of like teenagers and adults, and I just want to add, and I know it's a really heavy and it's a hard topic, but you know, even young children have suicidal thoughts, and I want to just put that out there because it happens. And I think coming out of the stress of the pandemic, we've seen more and more young kids, you know, like third grade. Sometimes even younger. And I just wanted to say, you know, in the cases of young children, some of the warning signs to look out for might be kids that just intentionally hurt themselves a lot or seem to just get hurt a lot, and not for just kind of usual clumsy reasons. You know, kids might play by wrapping things around their neck, and you might find them that way. They might draw pictures. They might ask about it. And so this is something, while it's really heavy and scary, that we want to just alert people to, so they can be looking out for any warning signs.
Absolutely.
Just like you said, Elyse, to be able to reach out to get help, because this isn't something, you know, that we should have to just navigate all on our own.
Mm-mm. And there's ample help out there, or I shouldn't say ample, but there are ways to get help. You know, obviously we're here at CCI, you know, we are available, but if there's a more immediate help, I always tell people you can call 911. They are equipped to help people who are in immediate crisis. You can always go into an emergency room and tell them that you are having a mental health crisis. You can always bring a family member or a loved one to an emergency room and say, you know, they are feeling suicidal, or they don't feel safe. You don't have to be imminently suicidal. You can just not feel as though you can maintain your safety. Montgomery County, if you live in Montgomery County, you can go to the crisis center. They have a crisis stabilization unit if you are not feeling, again, as though you feel that you can maintain your safety. There are, you know, there's a suicide hotline, and the number, and I apologize, is escaping me. I will grab it, I will find it, and I will get it. There's a text hotline. If you text in the body of your text messaging on your phone to 741-741, and you can text a trained crisis hotline worker, and they will communicate with you. So there are plenty of ways to get help, so that you can, again, start to feel better. As Allison said earlier, this is not, in essence, a prison sentence. You can feel better if you are depressed and having suicidal thoughts.
Estamos hablando del hecho de que es un tema muy difícil, es un tema pesada, y si usted está luchando con eso solo, o si alguien que ama a un ser querido está luchando con los pensamientos del suicidio, queremos decirles que usted no debería tener que navegar esto solo, que hay muchos lugares y recursos para ayudarlos. Hay un centro de crisis aquí en Montgomery County que puede llamar. Hay un número telefónico, una línea, como una hotline en línea, y el número está abajo. Un rato estaba allá, pero que puede llamar 24 horas, 7 días en la semana, y siempre haya una persona formada para contestar al teléfono. También a este número 741-741, que es una línea de crisis, donde puede mandar un texto a cualquier hora, también para hablar con alguien profesional sobre sus pensamientos, sobre sus emociones, cómo se siente. Porque otra vez, es algo difícil y queremos apoyarlos. Y ustedes merecen ayuda. No deberían navegar algo tan difícil solo.
Okay. Well, you actually just both answered the last question, which was when should I get a hotline or authorities involved? And now, since we're coming to an end, is there anything that they should remember out there regarding today's Ask Me Anything? Algo que deberían recordar de esta conversación del día de hoy, como ustedes contestaron ya la última pregunta que fue cuándo debería llamar a las autoridades o la línea de ayuda.
So you said what should, can you repeat the last question? It was just hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. What should we remember about today's Ask Me Anything regarding suicide prevention?
So, okay, so I think that communication and direct questioning for anybody that you have concerns about, and again, as Allison pointed out, in a safe, gentle, supportive manner. Everybody that I have ever spoken to who has had any sort of intervention done outside of the therapy office about suicidality or suicidal thoughts has always been very thankful and appreciative that somebody has intervened. And it shows that people care about somebody's well-being and the fact that they are around. So I think if you take one takeaway, people are genuinely appreciative that they're thought of and cared about.
Yeah, and I might say, I don't know, I'd like to speak to just the shame around suicide. I think it's a really difficult thing to talk about, and I wish it wasn't the case. I wish I could tell people this is something we talk about every single day in our jobs. I mean, there are people multiple times a day who come into our offices and are struggling with this, and I wish people out there would know that they are absolutely not alone, that it is absolutely not a forever thing. And then they shouldn't have shame. They didn't choose to feel this way. They're not choosing to have these thoughts. And just as we don't choose to, I don't know, struggle with diabetes or cancer or medical diagnosis, you know, we don't choose to feel suicidal. And, you know, in the same way, I hope people feel empowered to seek out help because they deserve it. And because, like I've been saying the whole time, they don't have to just figure it out on their own. And that's how I see our roles at CCI in general, whether through the medical staff, you know, speaking with your doctor or a nurse that you trust, or here on the therapy side of things, you know, seeking out professional counseling help. Yeah, maybe I think that would be my number one takeaway.
Yeah. We're a team here, and we all work together to help you take care of whether it's your medical health, your mental health, and we're all here to help people feel better. So we're all here to help.
Okay, well, thank you very much, ladies, for informing us today regarding suicide prevention. Today's Ask Me Anything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.